in this industry, one of the hardest things is monotony. Because when you're a zookeeper, it's not about going and playing with animals every day. It's about going in and cleaning the glass. There's fingerprints again. There's the water bowl again.
I was there 5 minutes ago.
Same fruit again. There's a poop again. I got to check
inside or outside the enclosure.
Well, mate, you run a zoo long enough. It could be anywhere. She said, I remember you standing behind the counter next to me as equals, and you said, I'm going to own a reptile zoo one day. And I said, did I? And she said, yeah. And I went, I always knew I would. I just didn't know how I was going to do it. So what can I do today to work towards that? And when you're taking small bites, nibbles of what you're doing, you can make big things happen. What I do need to explain to you and to anybody watching this is that I actually had and have not ever formally received any qualifications on herpetology, which is the keeping of reptiles and amphibians. And I have never worked in a zoo before, and I own one. So that could be quite controversial to some people. But when you look back...
How did you do that? What? That's not right.
Yeah, hang on a minute, you know. But when you look back and you think every zoo and every vet and every person that ever came from somewhere where no one had ever done that before. My dad worked at the Canberra University, and again, it was a different time. And one of the environmental people there said, you've got kids, here's some reptiles, we don't need them anymore, take them home.
What a different life indeed. Wow.
It was, and I remember this too, actually. Behind my home where I used to live was actually a guy who worked for customs. And these red-eared sliders, which is, I know what they are now, but I didn't back then, were confiscated. And he took them home and said, well, you know, I brought these home because they're not allowed to have them. And here, did you want a turtle? That's a loaded question. I don't know if you know, in our industry, this is a new one. This is very big.
Welcome to Working with Wildlife, where I, your host, Jaden Lunt, speak to experts and enthusiasts in different fields of nature to find out how and why they do what they do. In today's conversation, I'm speaking with the founder and owner of the Canberra Reptile Zoo, which is a growing zoo that focuses primarily on reptiles down in Canberra, Australia. He's also the founder of Reptiles, Inc. You might have figured out by now that we're, in this conversation, going to be talking about reptiles. In addition to that, we're also going to be hearing about what it takes to run a reptile park and hearing stories and some of the learnings that today's guest has experienced. So, without further ado, please welcome to the show the current president of the Canberra Reptile Club, Pete Child. Thank you very much for coming onto today's episode. I said before, I'm pretty excited to be having this conversation with you. When I found out when I came to your zoo a couple months ago, late last year sometime, I found out you were there. Time goes by fast. It does, and you gave the time to have a little chat, and I really appreciated that. So I'm looking forward to today's conversation.
Yeah, no worries at all. Thank you very much for being patient with me, because I know it's not always easy to pin me down. So you've been very patient organising this, and no, it's good. I'm always around the zoo. I'm always there, one place or another, but usually I'm darting around like an ant somewhere. So I'm glad I caught up with you when you were there too. Yeah,
and you've got so much going on. When I was there, you did give me a bit of a preview on like a really cool extension to your zoo. First off, where are you located? What zoo are you part of? What am I talking about? And what is this new extension that you've got?
Okay, so look, to start with, I'm probably going to start with sort of explaining to you something about the name of our location. So when I started where I am, I'm in a place called Gold Creek Village, which is the name of the area. It's actually in a suburb in Canberra. It's a tourist area, so it actually has a few other attractions in the area. There's a dinosaur museum, which is very well known, Cockington Green, which is a miniature English village. I went there when I was a child, so it's been around for more than 40 years.
Fair while.
And also there is there's a bird aviary there as well. So it's a little tourist area, and it's key to me coming up in what I'm doing as well, because one thing I learned very early is that ACT, so in Canberra, we have different regulations to surrounding New South Wales. And one of the things you can't do is you can't open a zoo in a suburb. So zoning is like in New South Wales, you have different councils in the ACT. We just have one big council. And zoning is where you can and can't function. And the first time I started my business, I didn't know about that. And I actually started in the suburbs and had to move. And I was very fortunate to find this little area. And the reason why our name is interesting is because 13 years ago, the location I took over had one room with reptiles in it and about 7 snakes and a couple of lizards. And I called it the Canberra Reptile Zoo. And everybody just went, it's not a zoo. You can't call that a zoo. And I said, but it will be one day. So this has been a long-term vision of mine. And I guess we use the term zoo because it used to be called a sanctuary, and then it was actually called the Australian Reptile Park at one stage. It's gone through a few different names, but when you say Canberra Reptile Zoo, you can't be much more succinct than that, can you? You know where we are, you know what we've got, and you know what we're there for. So that name was very important to us. Yeah.
So why do people have like an issue with the word zoo? So if in your mind, what do you think of zoo and sanctuary? What's the difference?
So there's an instant assumption that a zoo is a certain size and carries a certain number of animals. And when we were very small, and when people first arrived and went, oh, here's a zoo, and they walked in and you only had one room with some snakes in it, they went, this is not a zoo, and of course the technical definition, it's a park that exhibits animals, zoological facility that exhibits animals for education and et cetera, et cetera. Right. So we met the criteria, but as people we have an impression of what we expect a zoo to be,
what it looks like.
So yeah, and to this day it still causes a little bit of confusion because we are very well hidden. I mean, you probably know when you came to find us, we're not exactly on a main thoroughfare. And to this day, people still go down the road to the dinosaur museum and go, we couldn't find any reptiles, and go, no, because they're dinosaurs. So, and we are very well hidden. And Canberra does have a very large, really beautiful zoo, which is a National Zoo and Aquarium. And so a lot of people get confused between us and them. Sometimes it benefits me, sometimes it doesn't. So when people say, where are the tigers and lions? You go, no, that's not us. So it's, but it's been an interesting journey for me. I can say that much.
Yeah, where's the tigers and lions? Well, Reptile Zoo kind of says it. Cool. Okay, read the name. I think at the front of yours, you also have it. You do have a dinosaur. Is that attached to your complex?
Oh, that's it. Yes, it is. That's history. That's going into our history. So to sort of explain that would have to explain where I came from and the journey I've gone through to get to where I am, because I wasn't always what I am now. And I'm a very, very strong believer in adaptation. You have to adapt or die. And I'm just talking about the natural world in animals. I mean in everything, including business. So you adapt or die. And
in business.
So my business started in a very, very different location, a very different way. I've always had a vision of what I knew I wanted. And where I was hoping to get. I just didn't quite expect it to take me this long. It's been about 24, 25 years now or something I've been doing this for.
Okay, so it's been a long period of time that you've been doing this.
Sure has.
And right now, like one of the big things that's like at this latter part was this crocodile demonstration area pit. What was a pinnacle. What is that looking? What was that? That's a pinnacle thing. So, like, that was
a pinnacle. Yeah. So the reason why it was such a pinnacle for me is because to help explain the situation. So my business started with no financial backing. So I started this. I didn't have. In fact, I used to night fill at Woolworths at night and then come in and run my business during the day and then go at night and work at Woolworths. Sometimes I was operating on, and I was a lot younger then, sometimes I was operating on as little as 4 hours sleep if I was lucky to get that sometime. So I started with nothing. And so what we've done is we've built the business to a point where we can afford to expand and add a little bit more and expand and add a little bit more and so on and so forth. And the reason why the crocodile's new exhibit was such a pinnacle for us was we took on a saltwater crocodile. I think we worked about 9 years ago now. And of course they grow, don't they? And we went 9 years ago, we went, we'll take this on. And what most zoological facilities do that have, they're called ambassador animals. So those are animals where you just take them around for people to touch and hold, right? When they reach a meter, you've got to surrender them. And then you start again with the baby. Well, we got this guy and we went, we don't want to surrender. This is our first saltwater crocodile. A whole other story. It took me 10 years to get a permit for it. I don't want to give it up. So we thought, we'll build him a new home. And, of course, that journey took us 5 years. And we had to raise. So we originally went, look, I think it's going to take about 40 grand to build this thing, right? We can build this for about 40 grand.
40 grand.
We're very capable people. We can build ourselves. We do all the work ourselves. We just had to raise money. And I got this idea of shipping containers and how we're going to create this. And, well, boy, was I wrong. And, of course, there was a pandemic, that little pandemic thing that happened. That also happened at the beginning of this journey.
Yeah, something like that.
And, of course, like all tourist and facilities where we're hanging on by the skin of our teeth and for dear life. So we raised the money and it ended up costing us over $200,000 to produce. Now, 2 big zoos, that's nothing. Do you know what I mean? That's a grant.
Right.
That's a single grant. I saw the other day a local facility got a $100,000 grant to build a pergola. That's nothing, but to us, that's the single biggest project we've ever had. And we had to raise that money ourselves. So, and not just raise that, we had to raise that money while operating. So we now I've gone from myself and my family to 18 employees. And we're running a facility with, I think it's unassuming, but there's well and truly over about 500 or 600 animals there now. Not all of them are on display, which is why it doesn't look that big when you're in the face of it. We have to run that facility every week. That costs a phenomenal amount of money to run a zoo. You may not think that it does, but especially with so many predators eating so many mice and insects.
Meat.
And then we had to find extra money on top of that to be able to put aside to build this enclosure. So what was meant to take us about 12 months took us 5 years.
5 years and not just 40 grand, but 200.
No, 5 years. And, of course, what happened was the croc kept growing, didn't he?
So that whole period of time. And so did you reached a point. You have to grow too.
So he would have been inside the facility when you were there. Is that correct? Was he inside the building?
Yeah, inside in that glass section.
Yeah. Now, I mean, look, I won't go into it too much because I don't want to get into a to and fro about the ethics of what reptiles require and need and all that kind of stuff. I don't feel we're being cruel. I mean, crocodiles have a huge home range in the wild, which is more about avoiding other crocs and having their own. That's a whole other story. But the point is that the facility he had inside was equal to what you might see somewhere in Darwin at a croc farm, for example. The problem is the ACT has very stringent regulations for how animals are housed, and it didn't meet. So I was very fortunate that people could see, and when I say people, I mean authorities, could see that we were working towards it. We were making promises. We're definitely meeting goals, but we did reach a point one day where they just said, okay, enough's enough. And we said, so did we, because one of the things we were worried about is social media is a big thing these days, and it's huge. And so if you invite someone and they look at something and film it in a certain way, that can blow up and it can bite you in the butt.
Not for the right reasons.
No. So I was always a bit nervous about people seeing our crocodile in his home and going, oh, this is too small for this big crocodile, and it would blow up. So we were very reserved about our social media involvement and how much we promoted ourselves in general, which is difficult when you're a tourist attraction. And so the pinnacle of this was building this enclosure. It took 9 months to get the final approval for construction, and then we had 3 months to build it. And myself and my team, I mean, we nearly killed ourselves doing it. And I mean, I'm not talking literal, but it felt like it. We were working, we were sleeping a couple of hours a night. I'm in my 50s. It's not an easy thing to do when you start to reach my age. We did a lot of the physical work ourselves, the things we couldn't that required approval. from builders and foundations and obviously glaziers and stuff that was electricity. We had to get trades in. Anything that we could do ourselves, we did ourselves.
You did it.
And this is a very unusual construction because we don't own the property or the land. It's not our property. We're renting. So when we built this thing, in the ACT, a saltwater crocodile can't live outside. An alligator can, but a crocodile can't. We have freezing cold temperatures and snow
Is it because
occasionally
of the
in winter.
temperatures?
Yes. You couldn't heat the water. You couldn't do it. We're at a high altitude here in Canberra. So what happens is we get frosts and we also get snow. And not very often, but occasionally. And it would be impossible. And if the croc came out of the water and went to sleep, he would die. So we couldn't take that risk. So what we had to build was an indoor facility. And we had to do that without building a permanent structure. So we ended up creating, it's close to a 90,000 litre indoor swimming pool made out of shipping containers that have been joined and welded and bolted together, and a full roof construction. And we've also tried to keep something about our reptile zoo that's very different to a lot of the facilities is we've tried to keep it very intimate. So when you're there, you can actually walk in and around. And so when you go to the new crocodile exhibit, you actually go over a walkway and the croc often sits under you and stalks you. And then you can go around and inside. You're actually inside the exhibit. So you walk in a walkway where he's in the water section to your right and he goes up and across. He then goes outside, which is to your left. So you can sort of be in the center of wherever he is. And so we had to construct this thing in a way that was a non-permanent structure, that met all our requirements, that it's a heated swimming pool, all that other kind of stuff. So it was a big project for us to do, and we pulled it off. We did it. So we're very proud of it. And we moved the croc in on Croxing Day. We coined Boxing Day, Croxing Day.
Croxing Day, okay.
It was
Nothing
we are
to do with the
open.
shoes, okay.
One thing you learn, especially as a zoological facility, we are open every day of the year except Christmas Day. So on Boxing Day, we called it Croxing Day. We opened it to the public. And since then, we've gone a bit crazy with our social media. Although I will say that there's one platform we haven't quite hit yet. I haven't been game enough to step into TikTok yet. But certainly we've been featuring it a lot. And now we're not afraid to say, come and check this out.
Yeah, because you could facilitate it correctly. Yeah, I understand that.
Yeah, so it was the most expensive thing we've ever built, and it also was a gateway to a new area. So we spent a couple of years building a small amphitheatre with a large screen. We can't. So when you go to most facilities and you watch crocodiles feeding, you can sit in or around that facility, and because of the way we built it, we can't get everybody around it. So we actually built an undercover area that has an enormous, I think it's a 5 by 3 meter LED screen. So when we're feeding the croc, you can watch it live while you're right there. And it's also where we do venomous snake shows and everything else as well.
Yeah. I think that was the more produced, in its final kind of stages when I was there, and it looked very, very neat. Very neat.
And we've had a couple of movie nights there. It's been great. It's a great area.
Yeah, so it's kind of turning into a bit of a community space as well. Is kind of what you're looking at.
Yeah. And what it's also done is it's changed the face of our business, because where we are when I originally moved into this building, it was already a reptile park. So it was owned by
private,
Yes, it was. It was owned by an ex-park ranger in the ACT. He opened it as an education facility because he had a real passion and love for venomous snakes. So he had a bunch of venomous snakes. We've still got one of his original snakes, which is over 20 years old now. It's an inland taipan.
Inland taipan.
Yeah, inland taipan, still going, 20 years strong. And he wasn't particularly entrepreneurial, so he didn't grow. So in the 13 years that he had it, the facility remained the way it was. And unfortunately, if you don't grow and adapt, you don't survive. So after 13 years, he fell behind, but it was just the one building, one room, and one lecture room. And when my business was separate, so I was actually a mobile exhibitor, and I was operating out of my home.
Started as a mobile reptile demonstrator.
Yeah, it did.
Right.
So, I mean, forgive me if I'm jumping around because my story's quite complex. And so
much.
Would you like me to? I'm happy to sort of probably jump back a little bit and talk to you about where I came from. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, with all this kind of wildlife stuff, could I ask, Pete, it sounds like a lot of your working years have been for yourself, and with this vision to create a reptile park, and we're kind of at this end, 25 years, this pinnacle moment with the crocodiles. What previous jobs did you have to this self-run entrepreneurial kind of life that you've now lived?
If you're holding on to your seat, are you ready for this?
Okay.
I'm a graphic designer.
A graphic
I'm a qualified graphic designer. Yep. So I have an artistic flair. So I was always an artist. I went through school enjoying artwork. I always had an affinity for animals. I love animals. I've always loved animals and wildlife and natural world. When I went through school and I became a qualified graphic designer, so I learned how to design. Now, it was a totally different world back then. Everything was done by hand. It's all digital now. It's all on computers. It's all very, very different. Back then, if you wanted to draw a logo, you actually had to do it physically by hand. And it was a real skill.
AI?
No, no. And so as an illustrator, which is what my specialty was as a drawer, I did quite well for myself. But I got known as a wildlife illustrator. So I was doing a lot of wildlife illustration. Now, the problem with that is I'm a people person and I love working and I love being around people. I love to talk. It's what I'm known for. I love talking, right? And so I started to go a little bit crazy because I was sitting in a studio drawing all the time. And what happened was I actually picked up a weekend job at a pet store. Okay. And so I really enjoyed it because I'd go into this pet store and I would talk to people about animals and I would just talk to people. It just got me out of the studio and into the public eye. Now, while this is going, sorry?
How old are you at this age? At this stage?
I would have been in my 20s, about 21 or something like that, maybe.
Yeah, early 20s. Early 20s. And why was this happening? 20s,
yeah. And forgive me if my timeline is wrong because time is a funny thing, but it would be around about that. So, and what's interesting was that I myself had reptiles already in my life because my dad worked at the Canberra University. And again, it was a different time. And one of the environmental people there said, you've got kids. Here's some reptiles. We don't need them anymore. Take them home.
What and a different life indeed. Wow.
It was. And I remember this too, actually. Behind my home where I used to live was actually a guy who worked for customs. And these red-eared sliders, which is, I know what they are now, but I didn't back then, were confiscated. And he took them home and said, well, I brought these home because they're not allowed to have them. And here, did you want a turtle? And so it's a very, very different world because biosecurity-wise, I mean, that would be a horrific thing to have happen now. But back in those days, they were like, what are we going to do with this corn snake? I don't know. Here, take it home. Do you know what I mean? It's a very, very different world now. So so we grew up with eastern long-necked turtles in our backyard, and we did everything wrong. I know that now. But they survived because we built an amazing little ecosystem for them without even realizing. We sunk a big metal bathtub in the ground. They were next to our vegetable patch, so they were eating all the insects. We were feeding them everything wrong. It was quite incredible, but we grew up with them, and I became very passionate about learning about that animal. One got sick, and I didn't know why. And what surprised me more than anything was that I couldn't get any help. So pet stores couldn't tell me what to do because no one really knew about reptiles. At that point, and this could be quite controversial, there were no reptile shops in the whole of New South Wales. They just didn't exist. And there were no pet stores that specialised in reptiles, and that'll come up in a moment. At that point in time, South Australia and Victoria, it was a really big thing. And they were already around. There's a place called the Herp Shop, and they were there in South Australia, even had a pet store with a croc in the middle of it. But north of the Victorian border, there was just nothing. And so I had to do a lot of my own research. And what really surprised me was, and because I'm going back far enough that Mr. Google didn't exist back then, right? So there was no Googling your answers.
No, stop it.
I had to use a book. So for some of your listeners or watchers, a book is like a tablet where the page is frozen and you just keep turning one tablet over the other and you've got to keep reading each tablet.
Pages.
That's a book.
Right.
So I started getting books and I started researching myself. But they all came out of America, didn't they? So all of the husbandry, now I am just talking husbandry, not ecology. So all of that, because my dad at the university had access to lecturers who all studied ecology and these animals in their natural environment, but nothing about husbandry.
Outside of the environment, or natural environment.
So these animals were already in my life. And when I went to the pet store, I fell in love with these little turtles, which I bought I was part of a franchise that doesn't exist anymore. And I bought these turtles and I went home and did my research and went, hang on, I can't legally own these turtles. So I went to Parks and Wildlife and said, can I own these? And they went, oh, yes, with a license. And it turned out the pet shop was selling animals that needed a license and they didn't understand. But even Parks and Wildlife wasn't fully comprehensive of the law surrounding it.
So this is really kind of like a tumultuous kind of
very, very early time. Yeah, very much. So I did my own research, not just on the husbandry, but what the legal requirements were as well. And this is ACT, not New South Wales. So I'm not talking about that was a whole different ballgame in New South Wales. ACT was completely different. Apparently animals get to the border and stop. Okay, they know that, right? So I'm doing this research and I'm fascinated by the fact that the ACT didn't have a policy. And I went, they don't have a policy. I can own whatever I want. And so I went to them and I said, hey, I'm going to get a keelback. Now, I don't know if you're familiar with that. A keelback is a freshwater snake. It's very well known, very small snake, well known for eating frogs and having an immunity to cane toad venom, poison. We know that now. But back then, very unheard of. And I found some down in Victoria. Right. And I came back to Canberra and I said, I've got this turtle, which I now have a license for. I've got long-necked turtles and I want a keelback. They just went, oh, no, you can't have that. And I said, why not? And they said, oh, because you can't have that. We don't know what it is. So I wrote a paper, my own little, and I'm not litigious in any way. When it comes to writing, I'm horrific, right? I mean, the best invention.
What age are we looking at now?
I'm not. This is all happening pretty quickly. So I would have been around 25. So this is within a 4 or 5 year period. Wow. And by that stage, I'd become the manager of the pet store. So because I don't sit still, right? If you hadn't noticed that, I don't sit still. And so I always reach for the stars. So when I was in school and I liked to do artwork, I became expert at every field of art, from airbrushing to coloured paints. When I worked in the pet store, I wanted to understand every part of that business and what it meant. So I learned all about UV lights and products, and I went to conferences and went down to Victoria on my own dime. I was a pet shop junkie. I went down there to all the pet shops and asked them all the questions. I got all the American books in on how to care for Australian reptiles, like bearded dragons and tree frogs. So I'm researching that, and then I wrote my own little paper on keelbacks and submitted that to the ACT government. So they let me have a keelback, and I got 7. So
they let me have 1, so I took 7.
And I had to learn how to build. I built what I didn't understand back then was what we now would classify a bioactive enclosure. So that's an enclosure with living organisms in it, running water. So I had to teach myself how bioactive enclosures work. So what I do need to explain to you and to anybody watching this is that I actually had and have not ever formally received any qualifications on herpetology, which is the keeping of reptiles and amphibians. And I have never worked in a zoo before, and I own one. So that could be quite controversial to some people. But when you look back and you think,
what? That's not right.
Yeah, hang on a minute, But when you look back and you think every zoo and every vet and every person that ever came came from somewhere where no one had ever done that before. And so for me, and I know there's a word for it, I'm very good at self-education. I can't think of what the word is right now, but I'm very driven. And one of the things I've noticed, so I'm going off on a tangent, I've seen some of your podcasts and I've listened to the people you've spoken to, and I'm really excited that you're here to talk to me about the business side, not just about a particular animal, but about how I got to where I am and what it means to work in this industry. And that's always an exciting topic to me, because the one thing I've noticed, no matter who you interviewed or what they said to you, the one thing that stood out more than anything over everything else is that every person you spoke to is self-motivated. So nobody went, I went to school and TAFE taught me how to run a zoo. And then I applied for a job at a zoo and I became a zookeeper. And now here I am on talking to you about how I now own a zoo. It doesn't happen that way. If you want to achieve anything in life, if you want to get anywhere, you need to put so much of yourself into that, and you've got to go beyond what's in front of you. Question everything. I was an annoying student. So understand by researching. So if someone says to me, keelbacks can't eat goldfish, I go, why? Why can't they eat goldfish? They go, because they just can't. Well, why? But I don't understand why not. I can't eat carp. Why not can't they eat carp? And so I would go into it. Then I would look at what that fish has over other fish. And by the way, keelbacks eat fish. Their diet's mostly frogs, but you can't legally use frogs. So you've got to find alternative food. And then you find out
something
that they've got an enzyme, that the carp have an enzyme that means they start losing keratin. I've learned a few things the hard way.
Okay.
My first crocodile lost his teeth and some of his scales, and I thought, what's going on here? And there was something lacking in his diet. I was giving him too many fish, and but they all grew back, and his scales grew back, and he lived to a ripe old age till I had to give him up. But basically, I learn by experience and listening to others. So I'm not blindly making up my own mind or what I think something should be. I'm researching it and asking different people, and you've got to be very open to the fact that you're wrong sometimes. And
so it's a bit of humility is what you're saying is necessary.
Absolutely, 100%, yeah. When it comes to scientific names, I get them wrong all the time, but I have a really good understanding of the natural world and how biosystems work and how animals work and I have real empathy for animals, and sort of when I'm working with them, I can sort of see how they work. So
behaving in the just in that, but kind of everything else outside of that as well. Good broad knowledge. Yeah.
So my history meant that because of the way I came up, and I was always working, and so here I am in a pet store, and here I am with reptiles, and here people are walking in the door and asking me how to look after their turtle, and I'm going, who told you that? And they're like going, oh, well, I was told that by this person or by this vet. I'm like, oh, no, that is totally wrong. And the turning point for me was one of my Emadura macquarieis, which is a Murray River short-necked turtle. They all got a fungal infection, and no one could help me. How do I fix this problem? And it wasn't in the books, and the vets couldn't tell me what to do, and no one seemed to know what was happening. And it actually ate away part of the face of one of my turtles, and I was so stressed by all of this that I looked into research into the bacteria and what affects it. And believe it or not, on the shelf in the pet store I worked in was a multi-cure that had methylene blue and malachite green, which are just very simple bacterial agents. It's a multi-cure for goldfish. And I thought, let me try something. And I put that onto a swab, put it directly onto the turtle's affected area, dried them out. And would you believe it? Within 48 hours, the fungus was gone. Now, there might be cures now for this, and there might be vets out there who can give you a better answer to what I am. Right. But my frustration was, why couldn't someone tell me that? So I started, certainly researching not just them, but the keelbacks, and then I got it my second snake. And anyone who owns a reptile will tell you they're addictive. My old work shirt, on the back used to say, my old work shirt on the back of it used to say, herpetology, it's not a disease, because when you say someone, I'm a herpetologist, they go, oh, can you get a treatment for that?
It's so
Is there
true,
an ointment?
Yeah, I'm going herping. What?
My old T-shirt, my old work shirts used to say, on the back, they used to say, herpetology, it's not a disease, it's actually an addiction. Here. And the front used to say, the best thing about my pet is that it can eat yours. So, because we used to go in the pet industry a lot, and I'd say, here's my snake. It can eat your lizard. It can eat your cat. So I had to start teaching myself. Now, what happened at that point in time was obviously there was a niche in the market. So I suddenly realized that I could get more animals if I understood them. So that was the way the ACT licensing system worked. If you wanted to own an animal, you had to prove that you had an understanding. So I started writing my own husbandry documents on all these different species, which included Merton's water monitors, water dragons, bearded dragons, whatever it was. And so I just became really hungry for that. And what was happening, and this is what started blowing me away, more and more people started coming to this little pet shop I was in and saying, you're the reptile guy. I was sent here from here, or here. Now, if you've never been to Canberra, it takes you about 30 minutes to drive from one side of Canberra to the other, 40 minutes in peak hour. So it still has a lot of people, but it's not a very big place. And so all of a sudden, people are coming from everywhere to this little franchise pet store because I was the reptile man. Yeah, and the one thing I am is entrepreneurial, if I'm nothing else. So I went, there's a niche. And at this point, my artwork was taking a back seat. And ironically, I was doing signage for the zoo and aquarium here in Canberra. So I was doing a lot of different artwork and stuff. And I was dabbling in this and that. And then I reached the limit that the pet shop could offer me. And one day someone came in and said, look, I've sent to you because I really need help. I'm buying a snake. What can I put it in? At that point, what you got to understand is that back then pet stores only carried brands that were small, Exoterra and Zoomed, which were very little tanks. So I'm buying a diamond python. What do I put it in? And back then it was white melamine cabinets, the old screw together cabinets. I went, look, I'll make something for you. Well, did that open a whole other door? So I went home. And so in case you hadn't noticed, I'm a jack of all trades. My dad is my dad's a very clever man who taught me how to use tools. And so I built my first sort of reptile tank for someone else. Up to this point, I had been building my own tanks. And I said, who sent you? He said, oh, I'm from Sydney. And I went, say what now? So this guy drove down from Sydney because he had heard in Sydney that there was a reptile guy in Canberra who knew about reptiles. And I went, what's going on
And just for listeners, that's like 2 hours at least, isn't it?
From the heart of Sydney, 3-hour drive, 2.5 hours.
Yeah, true. Yeah, traffic.
And it's a city. It's a major city. And I went, what's going on? So now there were places in Sydney that dealt with reptiles. There was actually a place called the Reptile Barn, which is a person working. They're not there anymore. But they used to work out of their barn on a property. So I went, this is interesting. So I stepped out of the pet store. I couldn't, I reached as far as I could in that environment.
Growth-wise.
But I had established myself. There was a market. There was a niche. So I went online, built my first website. Well, I didn't build it. Someone built it for me. Dial-up, very slow era. And no one trusted the internet back then. So I went online and started selling reptile products that I believed in. So Sylvania UV lights, I think they're now known as Arcadia. I was building my own tanks. I was working night fill at Woolworths, and I was in my garage at home. And so people went, look, I don't trust online. Can I come to your house? I want to buy this product from you. I want to see this animal that you're talking to me about. I went, at that point, I'm now 26. I've now bought my own house. I am I've got a partner, and she's going, no, people are not coming into our house. I said, I'll tell you what. And she made a fatal error. Now, we're not together anymore, but she's a beautiful person, my first ex-wife. I made a mistake. She made a mistake. She said, look, I don't care what you keep. It's just got to stay in the garage. Oh, boy. We had a double garage. So to cut a long story really short, 5 years later, I had 300 animals in my garage. And people were coming to my home, and I didn't want them coming into the home, so I converted the garage into a kind of an in situ little reptile house in my home.
Right.
And by now, I'm keeping tree snakes and jungle pythons, pig-nosed turtles. The more difficult the animal and the less people knew, the more I wanted it, because I wanted to learn about it. And I got these, people said, oh, Boyd's forest dragons, they're really hard to keep. So I got 5 of them, and I built a bioactive enclosure, and I had some successes and failures, but I was learning, and so I gathered quite a reputation and picked up enormous speed. So within
how big was these garages?
Look, my garage was only a double garage. So a carport, I don't know, 5 by whatever's a carport, 5 by 10 meters maybe. So it wasn't very big. But then I took over the driveway and closed that in, and that became the retail section. And what was interesting was I wasn't very big, but I only did reptiles. And because I specialized and because I was providing advice and information, and because I had so many unusual animals. Now, I also was utilizing
special kind of value.
Yeah. I was utilizing a little-known law in the ACT at that point in time where you couldn't have – so now things have changed, and the law, they closed the loophole in the ACT regulatory system, and you couldn't have reptiles in a pet store except for blue tongues and long-necked turtles. So, but I could have animals in my home. So I had a business in my home. So this is about understanding, right? So I had to understand the law, and I had to understand what I could and couldn't do. And so I'm sure I was a headache for a few people back then, but I ran this business in a way I knew I could. Okay.
Like your neighbors?
So no, my neighbors loved my business.
Yeah, that's the best thing. Did they set up a lemonade stand when you opened?
Well, they weren't far off, but they all had kids, and I was known as the Reptile Man. So I became the Reptile Man in Canberra. And look, there is one thing all the way through this. I've had a very, very high ethical standpoint, regardless of what it is, right? So I can live without it. So I don't need to rip you off because if I can't live – when you're in retail, sometimes you're really hungry for money, and to do that means you've got to do anything to make it – make money.
And I was never in that – on your part, but on someone else's.
Yeah. I was never in that position, and that's where a lot of zoos and zoological facilities cop criticism, because they will have animals and won't always care for them properly because it's about commerce and making money. And that's what zoos used to be known as. It's a very different world now.
It is.
But that was one of the original connotations. And a lot of breeders had bad reputations because they would breed animals and just sell them for money, and then it was too much hard work to deal with you when you couldn't keep the thing alive or it wouldn't eat. So they would just stop answering their phone to you. I was never in that position. And so with my neighbours, I was respectful of them, and I communicated with them openly, and my customers. And if we were getting too busy or there was an issue, I would cut my hours down. So I had respectful hours. But it was hard work. And I was working 7 days a week, literally. So needless to say, I ended up divorced. But as I said, my ex-wife was a beautiful woman. And so this business it consumed me. And it has consumed me ever since. So for the last 20 odd years, it has been my life. I guess if I was to be a child now, I'd probably be diagnosed with ADHD, because I am so,
You're focused. You've got a line of vision. You're not stopping. Yeah.
And believe it or not, this business and what I was doing actually anchored me. because it gave me a focus, something that and it was a productive and positive focus because I was doing
purpose,
something.
You would say.
And one of the problems you can have sometimes, particularly in life, is you can get a bit bored with what you're doing. And one of in this industry, one of the hardest things is monotony, because when you're a zookeeper, it's not about going and playing with animals every day. It's about going in and cleaning the glass. There's fingerprints again. There's the water bowl again. There's the same fruit again. There's a poop again. I got to check the light. There is
enclosure.
Well, mate, you run a zoo long enough, it could be anywhere. So, but there's that routine, and that routine can become monotonous. And so, when you're searching for ways of breaking that routine, you are looking for different things. And so at this stage, I was constructing enclosures and I was dealing with the public. And to survive, I was working extremely hard. I mean, I've really done the hard yards to get to where I am. So what I would do is I would take orders during the day. You would come in and you would say what you wanted from me. And I had no financial backing. So I would take your money and I'd put it straight back into buying more stock. If you bought a product off me, let's say, for example, you bought a hide rock, I would say, hey, are you going to use that box? No. I go, can I keep the box? And people go, sure. And they would give me the box. Why does he want the box? No reason. So I'd put the box up on the shelf and then put another hide rock in front of it. So when you walked into my shop and I had a fully stocked shop with all these products, half of them were empty boxes with one product on the front, so I could sell you that one product, but I looked like I was a very successful shop. And I often joked about that. And but I
very cunning, but very smart.
Yeah.
Yes. Good
so the business would close at 5:30 at night and 5-6 o'clock, and I would wave the last customer out. And I'd go in and then I would get in the workshop and I started cutting glass. I taught myself how to be a glazier. And then I was doing carpentry, and I would work through till 2 or 3 in the morning, building the tanks, and then get a few hours sleep and then wake up in the morning and open the doors again. And the next thing you know, there I am running my shop and selling the tanks I made the night before. Got my first little employee, young guy, lived right across the road from me, came over and started helping me maintain the animals. And then got my second employee, but couldn't have got where I was without some incredible people in my life, which my parents stepped in and they were free labor for years. In fact, still work for me today and still won't take any money off me.
Oh, that's so sweet.
Family is important. Volunteers were amazing.
Obviously.
Yeah. And what people around me could see was that because I put everything I made back into what I was doing and growing, I was never driving around in a sports car. I was never going on overseas holidays. I was always pouring everything back in. People were willing to help me because they saw my passion and believed in what I was doing.
They believed in the mission that you were following yourself.
Yeah. So we'll fast forward because here I am. I'm growing, and 8 years down the track, running this business from home, I built a reputation not just here in Canberra but also in Sydney. We started appearing at reptile expos and producing tanks that no one had ever seen before because they were different shapes and different orientations, and they were made out of glass, not timber. There were backgrounds that were being custom made for us. No one had seen anything like that before. So the very first
very new.
Yeah, so the very first reptile pet expo I ever attended in Sydney was the very first pet expo ever held in Sydney. It was called Australia Wild. It was run by a guy called Anthony Stimpson and Nick, who runs the Shoalhaven Zoo or owns the Shoalhaven Zoo, and they built this expo at Darling Harbour. And I showed up as a shop. I drove up there with my friends and family and a trailer and a van and every piece of product I could jam in that van, and we turned up, and my gosh, I cleaned up. You know why? Because nobody else showed up as a shop. Everybody else showed up. Now, there's a very well-known retail outlet in Sydney called Kellyville Pets, who's probably one of the biggest independently owned warehouse stores. Anyone in Sydney would know who I was talking about. He showed up with brochures. So, saying, we're going to do reptiles. And a few other people turned up with brochures going, we do reptiles too. And we were there going, and here's our reptiles and here's all of our products.
We do reptiles.
So, I went home with nothing. And because back then the pet stores weren't really into reptiles. And it was just a section in the corner of their pet store. And most popular thing I had was 20 kilo bags of red sand. No one had seen that. People were buying 2 kilo sands and had to buy 10 of them to get what they wanted from a pet store. So I, again, saw a niche. That was my only expo where I succeeded that well. Because the following year, the expo moved, and it moved to a place called Castle Hill. It was bigger and better, and everybody turned up, all guns blazing. And the industry in New South Wales was forever changed. And it was much bigger, and these reptile expos still run to this day. And we had a lot more competition and a lot more people, but it was a very different world, and people were still coming from Sydney to see me. I was still carrying products that no one had seen before, my custom-made enclosures. But my private collection had become very large and included some really unusual animals, which included a freshwater crocodile. Now, that freshwater croc, that was an interesting thing to get because
they
didn't want me to have it.
Simply put, the government didn't want you to have it. So in the process,
fair enough. Fair enough.
So what I'm seeing is that whilst you kind of built this
private zoo,
pet store, kind of pet store, private zoo.
Yep.
That you were primarily the zoo wasn't was more like back end, and the creation was more front end. Yeah, and
very
then
much.
You went to the expo. Whilst all this is happening, you've still got your animals at home that you're taking care of.
Correct.
And now it seems you're going to. Are you saying that's going to change now, and that's kind of swapping?
It is
right.
It is. Now, I do have to say that despite the fact that it looks like my business took a complete left turn, because here's a qualified graphic designer now running a reptile pet store.
Sounds pretty left.
It does. When I worked for the pet store, one of the young girls, because the people that used to work with me back then still talk to me today. One of them brought her kids and family to my zoo, and we were talking. She said, I remember you standing behind the counter next to me as equals, and you said, I'm going to own a reptile zoo one day. And I said, did I? And she said, yeah. And I went, I always knew I would. I just didn't know how I was going to do it. So what I did is you can't get bogged down by the big picture. I want to work in a zoo. I want to work in the animal industry. That doesn't mean you have to go out today and get a job at Australia Zoo. What it means is that you need to look at what's right in front of you. So what can I do today to work towards that? And when you're taking small bites, nibbles of what you're doing, you can make big things happen. You've just got to be consistent with that and not let things that knock you out stop you. You've got to rebuild, regroup, and keep moving. So I always knew that I loved animals and always loved talking to people and always wanted to have a reptile zoo. I just loved building enclosures for myself. I didn't want to sell them to people. Every time I built an enclosure, I stood back and went, I don't want to sell that. So, but I had to. And so what's happened now is things are changing for me. And what you find is that, and I'm a strong believer in problems and diversity and issues. It's like fire. It forges you and makes you stronger. So diversity makes you stronger. All right. And
purified gold is only purified through fire. Right.
So sometimes one of the issues with what they refer to as this woke generation and woke community is if people aren't made to deal with conflict and have challenges in their life, they can't grow. And I had challenges. No one wanted me to have a crocodile in my home, no one wanted me to have. So I had to fight for that. And to do that, my business had to change. Right. You want a croc in your home, you need to show us why you've got it. And I went, okay, well, how about if I go and educate people on reptiles? So here's a change. That could work, but then you would need a different permit. Well, how do I get that permit? You need to be able to go to schools and do education and talk. Okay, hey, school, would you like me to come and talk to your kids about the natural world? Oh, you need $20 million insurance to set foot in my school. Whoa, Whoa. Okay.
20 million.
Yeah, it was 10 million back then. It's 20 million now.
Okay,
geez,
inflation.
How do I, okay. So how do I do that? Well, you got to get an insurance policy, which costs X amount. Well, how do I afford that? Look, I want to come to your school and I want to talk to your children and I want to show them about snakes and lizards, but I can't do that for free because it's going to cost me to come to you. I need you to help me. Oh, we'll pay you. Oh, okay. So people are paying me now to go to their facility or their home or their school and share my animals with them. So my pet store started to take a different turn.
Yeah, I'm seeing this.
What also happened to me at the same time was I grew to a point where I suddenly couldn't be in my home anymore because, there were regulatory concerns and I had competition. And there were people out there, who pet stores and the old franchise I used to work didn't want to see me around. So that conflict came. You can't be there. You can't do this. Why not? Because of
there
this.
Wasn't just a conflict of words, but people were actively trying to make it challenging?
So our council turned up and said, you can't be here. But, by the way, my kids love you and they love – you're Canberra's a very small place. So, this guy turns up and goes – I'm really sorry to be here, but you can't be here. You're going to need to move. But by the way, my kids love you and love your place, but I'm sorry. And I'm like, well, what do I do? And they're like, so it forced me to move to a commercial facility and expand. But because I moved as a pet store and pet shops couldn't have reptiles, my business split. So we moved the retail to a retail shop just up the road from me. Whole other story, fascinating one in itself. And the other animals, my private collection, the crocodile and pig-nosed turtles and everything else remained in my home. Now, all of a sudden, I'm getting attention from, do you know who Dr. Harry is?
Yeah, I may have
Better
heard
Homes
the name.
and Gardens was a Channel 10 show.
Yep.
Dr. Harry was a very well-known celebrity on the day, back when there was like 2 TV channels to choose from and no one had streaming platform. Netflix wasn't even in Australia at that point.
No.
So he filmed a TV show here with me in my home about how to care for reptiles and my private collection and what we had. So, everything's growing and all of a sudden I'm gaining notoriety. I'm still not making any more money than I used to, but I am
you're famouser.
Staying, because every time someone opened another door, I put more money into it. Now, what I will say as a graphic designer, I did have the ability to make myself look more professional than I was. I am Peter Child. I was called Reptiles Incorporated or Reptiles Inc. back then. And I was operating from my home, but geez, I had amazing business cards and phenomenal Yellow Pages ad, if no one knows what that is, and an incredible logo. And, and so people looked at my business professionally.
Yes.
Yeah. So I had a shop and the shop was good, but I still had all these animals I wanted to show off. So how do I do that? Well, I started actively advertising that I would come to your home and do private birthday parties or come to your school. Openly online to anyone who would listen to me. And, Facebook was a thing. It wasn't as popular. You didn't have content. Yeah. Content creators didn't exist back then. But it was growing. And so I started going to people's homes and saying, here is a carpet python, here is a blue tongue. Now, what I was excited about was that every time it's amazing how ignorant people are about the simplest things. Blue tongue lizards. Blue tongue lizards. Oh, but that thing's got a blue tongue. Won't that kill you if it licks you? And you're like, I don't know, let's find out. So I have a wicked sense of humor. Okay.
Yeah, good.
Love talking to people, but am surprised that people don't understand it. Now, I joke, but at the same time, I had one of those in my front yard. I chopped its head off with a shovel because I thought it could kill me. Now, that really upset me. And that kind of ignorance is dangerous. And so our retail store is growing. I have some amazing staff who've picked up the mantle. One of them is still with me to this day. She's now one of the directors of my company. They were able to help me spread my wings because I wasn't bogged down with being in the shop every day, all day. So I start going out to schools and I start going out and I start realizing how little people know about animals. So we started appearing in shopping centers. Now, the problem is because I'm doing mobile shows, I've got money coming in that needs to be spent on mobile shows. So what do you need for a mobile show? More animals. So, hey, who doesn't need a parenti, right? So you got to get a parenti, got to have a parenti. Oh, I need a bigger carpet python. I need, and so
more
all of a sudden my collection
to keep
got
up with
bigger.
the demand.
The retail shop wasn't here anymore, so I had more room to put animals in different places. And anyway, while this is going on, the current facility I'm in now, the building that I'm in, was built as a dinosaur museum and a reptile park originally, and it had fossils and a few snakes. And so I'm growing and growing as an entity, and I'm moving around, and I started becoming a little bit of a zoo. And then all of a sudden, the council pops its head up again and goes, well, we've just found out you can't actually be a zoo because you're in a suburb.
Council.
And I'm like, oh, damn. But by the way, my kids love you.
Oh, really? Again?
Different guy. Totally different guy. Hey, we see everything you do in the paper. Back when newspapers were how everybody learned. We love what you do, and you're great in the community, and you're putting yourself out there, and you're doing good. So we're going to give you some time to get yourself sorted out, but you can't be this. Oh, what am I going to do? So I go out to this facility, and at that point, the guy was ready to retire, and business wasn't going particularly well for him because if you don't grow and evolve, you don't survive. And the fossils had gone. The dinosaur museum had been built. That was a totally different facility now. And I went there, and it was his time. And in fact, he wasn't even there anymore. It was being run by someone else, and it was really.
So you were struggling. It was struggling, and so how did you find? You knew about him? How did you know there was a problem? That you saw a way to get in, and then how did you start that conversation?
So without bogging us down on a whole different tangent, another person attempted to open their own facility there. So someone else actually took over the place and changed the name and the look, and he was academic. I know everything about reptiles. I'm qualified. I can do this. Now, if you've ever been in this industry, it's about personality and it's about people and it's about understanding. So anyone can keep a bearded dragon, but very few people can make you want to keep one and make you find it really fascinating and want to pay them money to hear about bearded dragons. So, and I'm just using that as an example. So it's a very people-orientated industry. So if you want to get good, and I'm talking in the upper echelons of running this business, zookeepers don't often do that. In fact, we've had quite a few zookeepers come through where with our facility, we've gone, oh, and I know you're a zookeeper, but I need you to talk to those people. When they come in, talk to them, turn around and go, hey, I'm feeding these. Oh, I'm not doing that. That's not my job. I'm a zookeeper. My job is to feed the animal, and that's what I'm paid for. And you're like, oh, maybe that's how it's done in other zoos, but that's not how we do it in our facility.
Yeah, I mean, you were paying them, so I would have thought, but okay.
Yeah, no, I've seen it myself. So when I go to other, because I'm a zoo junkie as well, everywhere I go, like I was in Melbourne last weekend, I went to 4 different animal facilities. No one knew I was there. I don't announce myself. I pay, I go in, I walk around. I'm photographing the framework on the enclosure. My partner's like,
ideas.
God. Look at the tortoise, would you? Yeah, but I'm looking at the thickness of what they've done and how they're heating it. And so I noticed that zookeepers quite often are like ghosts in a zoo. So you'll see them drifting through with a food bucket or there's 2 of them talking and they walk past all the visitors. And bigger zoos than ours, I mean, much larger zoos that get over 100,000 visitors a year, I mean, it would be difficult. You couldn't stop and talk to every single person you met. You wouldn't have enough hours in the day. And then the owner of the zoo would be going, why don't you get your job done?
Yeah.
So I'm still fortunate. I'm still fortunate. My facility is still small enough that we have the time to get our job done and to interact with the public as well, which is one of the things that makes us who we are.
Makes you special and unique.
Yeah.
Right. And so you're saying one of the there's a zookeeper came in, and that was
this guy
similar.
No, he came in as an academic and basically drove the thing into the ground. So, because, knowing something about an animal and being able to share that is very different. So if a child says to you, is that snake poisonous? And you go, there's no such thing as a poisonous snake. Snakes can be eaten. Poison must be ingested. Venom is what they are. Venom is injected by tooth or fang. You've lost them. You've lost them. So if you're running a facility and someone goes, is that snake poisonous? You go, ew, what would you eat that for? And then you joke about it and explain the difference and make it interesting.
Yeah. Good,
he didn't have
difference.
That. This is not the original founder. This is the person who was currently in charge.
Academic knows everything. Yeah.
That's what we were told when we took over. And so what happened is I'm a mobile exhibitor and I'm going to shopping centres and school fetes and festivals. I'm working every day. And everybody said the same thing to me. This is amazing. This is so much fun. You're standing here holding, I get to touch a crocodile. I get to talk to you about that python. Why is it snakes don't chase me down the street and try to eat me? It was really hands-on. And I went, what you need is a zoo that does that. That's what a zoo needs to do. And so what we did was this guy who was at the time, without knowing the full story, he advertised it for sale.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay. He said, this is for sale. And we didn't know it was financially struggling at the time. We found out after we took over. But we went, look, hey, you know what? This place is for sale. We knew the previous owner. We loved him and what he did. We'll come in. So one of my best friends and volunteers at the time who had been, helping me, he came in, and so did one of my employees. She came in. Now, the two of them have both very wisely moved on to better careers than my own. But at the time, they helped me. All three of us put together, bought into this facility and built it together initially. And then over time, and it is hard work when you've got family and life. One is now in a very good government job, and the other one now, focuses on his family and a regular 9-to-5 job. Because if you want to work with animals and you want to be in this industry, it's not a 9-to-5 job, and you won't be earning
sacrifices needed.
You won't be earning good money, I tell you now. All right, but straight away. So effectively, we bought in. We that's how we knew it was available. We bought in. And we walked in, and we would have spent the first probably year or two just fixing it up. So we had to get in there. Now what I saw was potential, because I walked into this facility, which had 2 rooms and a lecture theatre, and I went, that lecture theatre would make a good shop. And this room, which is empty, would make a good lizard room. And this room with the snakes is great, but we could add. But what's next door? So I went out, and next door there was an empty building. There's room over there. And next to that was a block of land that was overgrown. And there's room over there too. But look, you know what? This has been fun. I'm going to buy the zoo. I'm probably going to go bust. Who owns a zoo with no financial backing, right? So I'm going to own a zoo, and I'm probably going to go bust. But let's have fun with it today, shall we?
Yeah,
so we went in there, and we built this facility, and we brought the elements of our mobile shows to a permanent facility. And it worked, and it worked really well. We invited schools and school groups in. We invited the public. We became very community orientated, but we kept our original shop in the southern part of Canberra, and to this day, it's still there. So Reptiles Inc. still exists. It is still in my home suburb of Canberra, which is the southern side of Canberra, and it still operates to this day. So, but the Reptile Zoo opened its own facility and has its own retail section, and we created our own what's the word? Not a mantra. I'm sorry. Businesses have a thing. See, I'm terrible at this. Businesses have a thing called a business,
business, like a statement, like a mission
statement. Thank you. It's
a
business statement. And so our business statement, and I don't remember the words exactly, it is on our website, is basically we are about conservation through education and understanding. And that includes educating the public. We do breed and keep endangered species. It includes mobile shows, which we still do to this day.
Right.
So it includes the retail, which means that, so if we don't have the retail, then where do people go when they want to look after their pet? And I mean, it's incredible. It's okay for me to say, I'm going to talk to you about earless dragons and I'm going to show you earless dragons, but more people own a bearded dragon in their home and are influenced by our pet section and good husbandry than will ever be influenced by understanding about blue tongues in their backyard. So reptile ownership and that side is part of what we do as our education.
What you do, that's part of your mission kind of statement.
Yeah, mission statement. Idea. Yes, it is.
Yeah.
And so is community. So we invite community groups and we've built an area. So I'm the president of the local reptile club. So the ACT Herpetological Association, I'm the president of that, and we host the meetings there at our facility, which I donate. We have a charity event every year called Snakes Alive at the Botanic Gardens. We donate to virtually every school group and every facility that comes to us that we can afford to. We donate tickets and funding and exhibits. We still go out in the community. So our business is more than just a typical or normal zoological facility. We are very intrinsically connected to our community here in Canberra.
And the people around you, right?
Yeah. And so we still have birthday parties. I mean, our birthday parties.
Yeah, what's that room that it used to be?
The
birthday party room used to be something interesting.
So it was a stable. It didn't take me long. We had the original facility. We grew quickly and we poured that money back in to the reptile zoo. And what I very quickly did, and when I say quickly, I'm talking, we had been there for maybe 2 or 3 years, maybe 3 years, went to my landlord and said, hey, that what's next door? And he said, oh, that's an adjustment. It's a paddock with a stable, because we always wanted a padding zoo next to the reptile park, but no one wants it. And I went, I do. So we knocked a hole in the wall and extended the reptile zoo out into this adjustment, and we converted the stables into a function room for bigger school groups and private functions. And
I think also you have in there, you have some cabinets with some of the some fossil stuff as well.
Have you seen my wings? Right.
Yes.
I am so this is I'm in my office at home at the moment. I'm a very eclectic person. I really love anime, and I'm a big kid. There's no other way of putting it. And I love toys and I love collecting. Mate, when I started owning a reptile park, my biggest problem was every time the gift shop got a reptile toy in, I went, I'm going to keep that. I'm going to keep that too. And no one cares, but I do, but they discontinue toys. And so I can buy a bearded dragon toy, which would be discontinued next season, and it's no longer available. So I kept all these toys and my daughter grew up. She doesn't want toys anymore. And they go, what are you going to do with these toys? I went, I don't know. I'll build a toy museum. So when you go into the back of our birthday party rooms, which is the same room we use for educational presentations, it holds about 70 children. Along the cabinet, along the wall, is a reptile toy museum of every reptile toy that's ever been produced. And when I say toy, I mean stuffed toy or gift shop toy. There's a few Ninja Turtles in there as well. And so there's that side of it. And we've influenced a few toys as well. So floating around Australia at the moment is a bearded dragon called the Canberra bearded dragon, named after us, because we said, you need this toy. Blue tongue lizard toys have just come out. I can't take responsibility for that one, but we're trying to influence more Australiana in that side of the world. Anyway, but the stables, we took over the stables, and that gave us a paddock, which became a playground. Anyone who owns a zoo knows that playgrounds are imperative.
So important.
They are. It keeps the screaming kids out of the zoo, but more importantly, brings families. And when you're a tourist facility, you need visitors to survive, not to be rich, but to just function. And parents love playgrounds. So in our playground, we also built an owl enclosure. So we have a couple of barking owls. Now, we're expanding our collection now, you see. So why have we moved into owls? Why do we have ringtail possums? Why do we have red-tailed black cockatoos? Well, our education is growing and people don't just try and hit snakes over the head with a shovel because they think they breathe fire and eat children in their sleep at night. They also don't understand the natural world and the order of things. So, how these animals work together. People think possums are gorgeous, cute little creatures and snakes are deadly. I tell you right now, I'll tangle with a snake over a possum any day, right? So we bring possums in and we hand rear and educate people and we talk about life cycles and how these animals work together and how some animals wouldn't exist without others.
You bring a possum around on his shoulders, I think. I saw one of those, that lad when I was down there,
People don't just understand, when you talk about a blue-tongued lizard, people don't understand that there's more than one blue-tongue. In fact, in the ACT, we've got at least 4 or 5 different color variations of the one eastern blue-tongue that's recognized. You step out of that, you've got at least 9 different types of recognized subspecies of blue tongues, and then you want to go beyond that, it just becomes unfathomable. But it's the same with possums. People just lump them all in one basket. Oh, them damn possums chew my cables. Well, that's not a ringtail possum. That's a brushtail possum. What's the difference? Let me show you. This is a ringtail. I'm not touching that brushtail, by the way. This is a ringtail. So, and these animals all work together. We had kookaburras at one stage. We're hoping to get some more back in again, hopefully soon. These animals wouldn't exist if reptiles didn't exist because they're a primary food source for reptiles. So it's about that natural world. Plus, and here's a big plus, in Canberra, it gets very cold in winter. We get snow and frost. Reptiles do not like the cold. So we built some really big, beautiful outdoor exhibits for our reptiles, which sleep for 4 or 5 months of the year outside, which makes a very boring zoo. Whereas the owls and the possums and the cockatoos, they're still functioning. So again, as a reptile facility and a zoo, animal facility, we have to address, well, when people come, what do they expect to see? Well, they expect to see animals. And if they're all asleep, there's nothing to see. So we've had to bring other animals in to allow us to expand. But
you have to be business minded in that sense.
Correct. So you can't just be single minded on, well, I love reptiles and I'm only going to have reptiles.
And can I ask as well, Pete, what are some things with in regards to running a reptile park? Like, I made a passing question before. I was like, is the poo on the inside or the outside of the enclosure? Because I know even for woolies, you've got some problems with poo, and you wouldn't expect that in woolies. So what are some of the things that goes into running a reptile facility?
Okay. So the first thing I need to explain, and I did say earlier in this interview that I have had to teach myself everything, right? And the first thing you need to teach yourself if you want to run a business, and I did it the hard way, and I'm going to have to, I will confess to you, I have been in front of a judge because my taxes, when it was only me, not my staff or anything else, my taxes weren't up to date because I didn't know how to run a business and I was struggling with that side of the business. Right. So technology has changed now. So with the press of a button, I can control that. But I also have a bookkeeper and an accountant and an auditor. So that's different now. But when the first thing you want to do, if you want to run a reptile zoo, is you need to understand how it runs. And that means knowing where your money's going and what it takes. And you need to realize that someone walks in the door and gives you $20 to enter your zoo, you're only going to see about $2 of that if you're lucky, because the rest goes everywhere else. And we're talking into operation. And so that was a very hard thing for me to learn, but I was able to do that very slowly by growing gradually. And I have had a few close calls. I've had to knuckle down financially and work very hard to dig myself out of some big holes.
What does that look like? Because, I mean, I know as well for the facility back in 2019, I think in a couple of months you had a fire and a burglary. In close proximity. So
no such thing as bad publicity. Yeah, look, insurances.
It was a rough time.
Insurances are crippling. You know, when you start taking on staff, you've got to do right by them, and that means wages and super, and they're also very difficult. Look, knuckling down means having safety nets. And sometimes it's meant rolling up my sleeve and getting in. So we had a fire because a goanna actually pulled they have an indoor bedding area and it has heat lamps, and a goanna climbed to the top and actually pulled the lamp fitting the entire fixture down into the enclosure, which of course combusted the material. The goanna, the lace monitor itself didn't survive, but his siblings did, thank God. And the facility didn't burn down. We had things in place that warned us, obviously smoke detectors, but it was still a pretty scary time. For us, it meant being closed for a couple of days, which really hurts you when you're an animal facility. Community got together and helped us. What it meant for us was it meant changing the way everything was done. So we had to then review how every enclosure had its heat lamps mounted. We then had to work very hard at taking money from this hand and putting it over here to run, you know. So you compartmentalize when you run a business. So that money was actually to build a new enclosure or to get in some Rosenberg's monitors, but we can't do that now. So unfortunately, we're going to have to put that to one side, and we're going to have to focus on this. Well, I juggle that every day. I look at my reptile facility, and I'm not happy with a lot of the original enclosures. I want to totally redo them. Technology and things have changed, and I know now how to build bigger and better, and photographic backgrounds are more affordable and stuff like that. But I don't have the money, so I have to put up with the green tree frog enclosure that I built 12 years ago because I've had to say no. And I've had to say no to the monitor that I really want because I just can't afford it. You know, so it means less staff hours and more hours myself to get things done because I've had to save money where I can. So it can put a lot of pressure on your family and yourself personally. Absolutely. Yeah. Because I am very entrenched and very hands-on with the running of our business. We are a very small facility. And so therefore how I run our facility is, you know, I have a lot to do. A lot of facilities aren't. Zoos aren't. A lot of zoo owners are over here. And a lot of the zoos, particularly in New South Wales and Victoria, are governmentally run. So they've got committees and councils and managers and directors.
There's a lot of backing, but you guys are
We're a small private zoo. Yeah. And something I didn't mention to you either, by the way, and it's important for your listeners to understand this. I am a crap businessman, right? So I ran a terrible business. I did for many years. So I ran at a loss for so long. I got tired of my accountant and bookkeeper saying, Pete, you just can't run a business. Why are you running a business? And I turned around one day and went, you know what? Why am I running a business? So in 2018, 19, I actually converted the business to a non-profit organization. So the volunteers...
Okay. That's a big difference. Okay.
It's huge. So my family is putting in their time and effort. My parents are working for free. Volunteers are working for free. Every dollar we made went back in, apart from a wage. I have a wage. I have a home. I have my own, you know, I have a wage. My wage is very reasonable. In fact, my staff earn as much as I do. Right? So effectively, it's very reasonable. And we put everything back in. So why not recognize that? Why not give up my ownership of the zoo. The only reason I need to own the reptile zoo is if I want to sell it. Or if it makes a huge profit, because if it makes a $1 million, $2 million, $4 million profit, I can go off on a yacht around the world because that's my profit. Yay, me. It's not going to happen, because if I made $1 million, I'd build a bigger croc enclosure.
Yeah.
So I went, you know what? I'm going to change the way this business operates. I'm going to protect the business from myself, and I'm going to give it back to my employees and volunteers and family. So I don't own it. I'm the CEO, so I still have full control. I'm also one of the CEO and director, and we have 2 other directors. What it means is that all profits go back into the business. You still have to make a profit. We don't pay tax, but these days with GST, it doesn't matter. You're paying tax one way or another anyway. And it meant that when the pandemic came, late 2019 and 20, I was eligible for government assistance, which I wouldn't have got as a small business. So if I hadn't, so basically that year I sacrificed to the right gods, whoever it was, because if I hadn't changed the operation of the business, I would have lost it.
Wow.
So because as a not-for-profit organisation, I was supported by certain government facilities, not local but federal, and only because I was a not-for-profit. And that funding just kept our doors open until the dust settled and we were able to return as a business. If I was a small business and not a not-for-profit, I would never have made enough money to keep my doors open, and I would have had to have closed. So I was very fortunate. So by giving up...
made that decision.
Giving up my own personal gain, giving up that side of it, I actually saved it, thankfully. What it does mean, though, is it does mean that the Reptile Zoo is a non-profit organisation. We're actually a .org. We're owned by a sub-company called the Act Wild, ACTWild.org. And we use that status to try and help us get funding. We haven't been very successful lately, but we are trying our best to try. We're trying to get grants to help us grow. And so we're working on that now. So as a business, it does mean sometimes it's tough, and you've got to have money for that, and it means sometimes less hours for staff, and they understand that, so they're good. They're good sticking with us, and it means more work for upper management because we have to work harder to make things work, and it also means being creative and adapting. So following the money,
that's a big thing. I feel like is what you're pointing out.
That's huge. Do I have to breed crickets to make money? Do I have to, do more birthday parties? I was having a conversation with you on another day. For me at the moment is social media. I do a lot of things in the business. I do all the graphics, all the artwork. I manage the business. I do a lot of the private functions and shows. Not all of them, quite a lot of them. I guess I'm the head keeper, I suppose. I mean, I've got guys who are head keepers who really make sure the animals are cared for because I'm so busy I can't always be there. But, I'm still – ultimately the buck stops with me when it comes to animal welfare and husbandry. So I'm always informed and kept up to date.
Yeah, awesome.
I do all the enclosure design. So I've taken on a lot. Right. And one of the things I let go is our social media. I let go of social media. But since the crocodile's new enclosure has been built since Christmas, we've been pouring a lot of effort into our social media to try and it's been phenomenal. Not for the reason you think, not because we're getting 1 million followers liking something we've done, but because everywhere I go now, I went to get a coffee the other morning and the lady goes, "Oh, I follow your page. I saw the other day that you actually caught a snake." Oh, by the way, we do snake rescuing as well. I didn't even mention that. That's another hat we wear. So here in the ACT, we originally did it for free as a non-profit organisation. If someone needed a snake removed, we would go out and remove it. We've had to since add fees to that because we've suddenly really busy with that, and I've had to employ staff for that purpose.
Yeah, and if I'm being a snake catcher myself, I don't think I could ever do that stuff for free. It's very can be very taxing.
No. Well, our not-for-profit organisation initially was bolstering that. That's what we were about. We were about raising money to help in the community. and saving animals was important because so many people were killing animals. Snakes. You've got a snake in your front yard. The best thing to do is to chop its head off. No. Call us. We'll come and take it. You know what I mean? It's like, and that's a whole other story, but part of our business. When you look at our website and our logo, we actually have 4 icons, and the icons are shop, zoo, show, rescue. So those are the 4 main things that our business does. Yeah, and a lot of zoos don't do that. So that's what makes us so unique and unusual.
Yeah, there are a lot of things that seem to make this this idea you had so long ago very unique, and it's very cool because when I think of every kind of reptile zoo or zoo I see in Australia, it seems like a very unique approach, and it's a good unique approach. If you were closer, I'd probably have come in a lot more. If you're closer, I'd come in a lot more.
There's a snake catcher. We're always after them. No, that'd be awesome.
It would have been great fun. Then also, there's so much, Pete, like that goes into a business. You said you're very entrepreneurial. Can I ask as well, going back even pre-21, when you were 21, that's kind of when a lot of this kind of stuff happened. I hear that kind of your fascination for reptiles started out when you were about 10 years old. When your dad brought some turtles home, which I think you kind of touched on that story. Is that when it all started?
Yeah, look, I think I've always loved animals. I mean, I've had dogs in my life. We always had dogs. My dad was my dad's a very pragmatic person, lovely, very smart, intelligent person, but he always said, you can't have an animal unless you can prove to me you can look after it. So I wasn't able to go out and buy a mouse. And when I did, I bought my mouse, raised my own money. I had to go out, get a little job, raise money. He said, you need to clean that. And I've already, this morning. So you had to clean it every day, and the turtles had to be cared for every week. So when I carried that with me as I got older, and I was at home until I was, I was in my 20s. So I sort of went from basically my parents' home to the home I run the business in now, So, and I'm still in my same home today. But that passion for those animals, when I started buying my first animals, it was like, learn about them, learn more. And it was exciting and thrilling. And my artistic background meant that I wanted it to look better than just, I couldn't handle a white melamine cabinet for my diamond python. I couldn't do it.
No, it's not very attractive.
I got timber, and my first enclosure ever was a giant painting of Medusa, and the snake could go in through its eyeball because the nesting box was a Medusa's head. So I always had that artistic flair, which of course transferred over into public displays.
Yeah. Did you? So you loved them all your life. Could you kind of say maybe three or a couple pinpoint moments that kind of really impacted this direction that you've taken into wildlife and being a curator of a reptile zoo?
Yeah. Look, sometimes you got to be pushed. Sometimes you have to be pushed. So, having, look, I think when I was working as an artist, and I was in a pet store one day, I was there, and someone said to me about killing a blue-tongued lizard because it was in their yard and they thought it was poisonous. That was a real turning point for me. You're an idiot, but that's okay. It's not because you're a foolish person. It's because you don't understand. Why don't you understand? So that was a turning point for me, wanting people to understand. And then the other part of that was when I had my own animal and I couldn't care for it because the information wasn't out there. That was a big turning point for my learning curve. That was the first one. Second one was when I had my own business and I was pushed out of my home and had to move into a commercial facility. Everything changed because all of a sudden I thought I was doing well till I went to a commercial facility. And then all of a sudden I got busy really quickly and I stumbled on myself attempting to run a business when I wasn't a businessman. So that was also a bit of a turning point for me. And the pandemic was another one. So we became a not-for-profit, and when the pandemic came, after years of running to keep up with this business, chasing myself, I ended up stopping, taking a break, stepping back, looking at our business and going, well, when things return, what can I do differently? And I was able to come back stronger than even before that period. And I think we've been growing in leaps and bounds since.
With all these kind of big foundational times and moments that you've had to make these big decisions, what is like a foundational kind of philosophy that you've used to make these decisions?
Look, I think certainly there's a lot of amazing people out there in this industry, and they write books, and I mean it's probably a little harder than it used to be. So nowadays with the digital media, so you've got YouTube and videos and stuff, there's a lot more people out there talking. There's a lot of clutter and background. Sometimes it's very difficult to sort out the real from the showy or the not.
Not set up.
I don't know if I'm making myself very clear, but ultimately what it comes down to at the end of the day is, I think philosophically, I would say listen to anyone who is willing to talk to you. Pick up everything you can, but you need to understand what you're being told, not just remember. So I may not remember the scientific names of animals very well, but I have a great understanding of the natural world and how they eat and how they live and their habitat. So because I can understand it. And so when people out there are talking to you, you always listen to what they have to say. And you don't always take everyone on face value. So you would listen to this person and this person. And I always ask the same question, why? So, someone would say to me...
That's one of my favorite. My favorite three-letter word is why.
Yeah. And it's funny because I'm not questioning that person knows what they're talking about. I'm not saying, why? I don't believe you. I'm saying, why? Help me understand how you arrived at that. So, that's very, very important, and karma. Karma. I'm not talking about the spiritual, mystical, if I do something, then it's going to come back tenfold. I'm talking about the fact that the way you live your life dictates the way your life is lived. So, if you do the right thing by others and you listen and you're fair and even-handed, people are like that with you. And sometimes it's really hard to be that way because sometimes you can see an opportunity or things might be really hard and you may want to take advantage of that situation because things can be really tough, but you just can't. And you've got to be true to yourself and true to the people around you, which means sacrifice, you know,
so
and karma.
Like the golden rule is kind of the do unto others as you would have them do unto you kind of thing.
Yeah, so absolutely treat people the way you would have them treat you. And I mean, it might sound like Peter's trying to make some giant philosophical, like he's some sort of guru, but I'm not. I'm just
I think it's still important. It seems to be that we have philosophies that we structure our lives around, and the deeper we think about it, and the more deeply we believe those and live those out, I think there's the possibility for both good and bad. I think it seems to me that can happen, but it's important.
And just don't give up. I mean, just don't give up. I mean, it is so easy to think something failed. And when something fails like that, like you might be trying really hard to do the right thing, but people around you who are doing the wrong thing are getting ahead of you. And you might think to yourself, maybe I should just join in with whatever they're doing. Don't give up because, you learn. So you learn and you think, well, why didn't that work? Or why is that happening? Or why are they succeeding when I'm not? And then all you can do really is all you can really do yourself is stay true to yourself, do the right thing and learn. Don't give up. Keep trying. Eventually it pays off. The thing about karma is it's not instant. So, well, actually I have seen it be instant. But the point is it sometimes in life you don't feel like it's going your way. But you get there eventually. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so the idea again, so that's kind of the underpinning philosophy you've used to make all these big decisions that you've had throughout your business and life experiences.
Can I give you an example? Would that help?
Totally.
Of the sort of thing I'm talking about? Okay. So when I started out way back in the beginning and when I was talking hours ago, I was telling you how when I started this, the ACT regulatory services had loopholes, and I could have utilized those loopholes, and I could have said, no, I'm getting that animal and you can't stop me, and I could have forced them into it. But I thought, no, that person has a job, and if I point out the loophole and get them in trouble, then I'm going to get what I want, but they're not going to like me very much after that. So my philosophy was to say, well, there is a loophole, and I think there's a problem with it, but this is why I want it. Let me help you help me get what I want. And it was hard work, 5 years. Right. I could have just forced my hand, but it took 5 years. And I finally got what I wanted by working with them instead of butting heads with them. What that means to me now is that I'm given the respect that when there's an issue or something comes up or I want something, they will listen and they will go, oh, listen, Pete, this is something, but we want to work with you on this to fix this problem. They're not going to come in and go, aha, got ya. You know what I mean? And
now.
so,
payback.
Yeah, and I'm not saying that anybody is no one's greasing my palms. I'm not getting away with anything. I'm just meaning it's respect. It's respect within the industry. That's it. Respect within the industry. You know, if I don't take advantage of others, they won't to me. And I've seen it time and time again. Yeah. My reputation means a lot to me. Yeah.
So reputation means a lot to you.
Yes,
and that's kind of what helps the business. That's kind of, as you're seeing, as one of the driving forces or one of the assets to the business is your reputation.
Yeah, look, I'm not particularly big on social media, therefore I'm not a famous person. No one knows who I am. But I've been around, I remember Peter Burgess when he wasn't who he is. I remember, I remember there's a lot of names, a lot of people, and I remember them when there were no pet shops and when there were very few people. I remember what the reptile park used to be like. I used to go there all the time. So, But I've been around a long time, and I've seen and done a lot. And the success of our business, 100% is carried on my back. So are its failures. But certainly, I hinge a lot on my reputation and who I am, not because I'm a famous person. I mean, in Canberra, a guy in a car park this afternoon said, "You're the owner." I said, "Yeah," and he goes, "I used to come to you when I was a little kid. Hey, kids, this is the guy." I went, "Oh, my God, I'm old." And so I'm known for that.
Granddad to many.
Yeah, it's very rare that someone would see me and spit on me. So that reputation means a lot to me, and it does, because I feel it's the way I've lived my life, and I've worked hard to live it that way. Mind you, if you do the wrong thing, I'll also, you're dead to me.
Yeah, you've got a very
but we're all like that. Yes.
Yeah, so, it's important to have a clear line, especially as running a business and being the head person. You do have to have very clear lines that you run by and live by. I would assume, and I can think.
And compartmentalizing is crucial. Yeah.
Well, Pete, I guess there's still so much that would be interesting to hear. Like, there's so many different things, and I love it. No, thank you very much. I think maybe one of the as we kind of let this conversation lands like a definitely not like the cyclone that we've got going on right now on the mainland. But what are some a couple important things that you think someone should keep in mind if trying to either work for someone as yourself or do something as you did? Doesn't have to be a whole lot. Just a couple. If you've got lots, then run away. And then we'll go on that overrated, underrated segment. Would be real good.
Yeah, okay, cool. No worries. No, that's fine. Look, all I can say to you, and I know I've said it before and I'll say it again, don't give up. A lot of people want to be in this industry. We get volunteers. We do a big volunteer program here, and they're always coming in and they're bright-eyed and bushy-tailed. And I talk to them and I say, look, if you want to be here and volunteer because you want to be here, I will have you. But if you think you're going to get a job with us, leave now. Because you're not. We don't know. When I hire people, they don't like to leave. And it's hard to get work in this industry. But don't give up. And so most of the people working for me volunteered for me. You know what I mean? They'll show up and they come time and time again, and they put all of their time and all their effort in. Some of the people that work for me now still have other jobs because I can't give them full-time work. So they've got other jobs where they go to and work during the week and come to us on the weekends because they don't want to give that up. So you have to work hard and you have to stay true to that and look for every opportunity. And you might do that for years before you get somewhere. So, but you also need to keep putting yourself out there. So if another zoo or a wildlife park or a facility says, sorry, don't need you, go, okay, I'll try again. Try again. You know, and then come back and try again and try again. You know, I hired someone. I've hired a young man. I'd call him one of our head keepers at the moment because he volunteered with us. He drove from Orange, which is about an hour and a bit away, hour and a half.
I was there like last week.
And he said, look, I'm from Orange. I went, holy mackerel, you're coming here to do work experience that far? Yeah. And he drove back and forth every week. And I was like, oh my God. And then he said, can I keep volunteering for you? I said, dude, that's a long drive. I feel bad. And he goes, no, it's okay. So once a week, he drove 1.5 to 2 hours to volunteer for us one day, drive home again.
Wow.
I gave him a job.
Totally.
I gave him a job. Man, I got to give you a job, man. I feel so bad that you keep driving. So I gave him a job 2 days a week so he could stay overnight and go home the next day. And then eventually he worked 4 days and now he works for us full time. So, you know, a lot of determination. It's really hard. So don't settle for what it is you're doing in front of you. If you're hired as a volunteer or a food prep or a keeper at a zoo, don't settle for that. Push yourself further. Self-educate. Learn as much as you can about what you're doing. Say, hey, I know that I'm here as a guest services, but could I also learn about this? Can I also learn about that? And put yourself out there. If I come back on my shift off, can you teach me how to use the register? Do you know what I mean? It's like you keep putting yourself out there and keep trying, because then you get known as someone who's willing to try and have a really good work ethic, because nothing is more irritating than volunteers and staff who say, yeah, I'll be there, and then not show up. And you get it. Someone has a problem. It happens. Everybody misses a day. Everybody's sick. But people who consistently just don't turn up because it's too much hard work for them. I tell you now, our industry doesn't. You don't last very long in our industry.
No, they don't take timely to work on people.
No, you can't.
Can I ask? Do you think age impacts the success on someone volunteering and getting a job and putting himself out there? Is it just for young people that this is seen? Or is there a bit of a change as you get older?
We've had to alter. Now, it's really interesting because age has nothing to do with maturity at all. At all. In fact, someone that I admire greatly is much, much younger than me. And he started as a volunteer with us when he was like 11, 12 years old. He's a very mature young man. He now works for Auto Pro, but will drop everything and get in a car and drive 7 hours to find a frog in the rain. So, you know, I really wished I had his freedom, and I love his drive. He's an amazing person. But he came to us when he was very, very young. We were taking volunteers at any age if they proved to us that they were mature. But there was an issue. No one died. Small physical issue. A volunteer injured themselves one day when they were putting an animal away. So the animal didn't even hurt them. One of the boxes did. Next thing we know, the insurance company is like, oh, how old is that person? How old is that person? So now we can't take anybody on unless they're like over 13 and whatever it is, 9 months, nearly 14, because they have to be independent. So that's one restriction that you might have on you. But that doesn't mean we don't have junior zookeeping programs and annual members who are under that age that come all the time to help us, right?
Well,
they're just not officially there. No, look, age doesn't really impact. I mean, I don't have older people come and ask me if they can volunteer. If they would, I'd take them like that. So, but maturity is much more important than age. Anyone of any age can come and prove to me that they're self-motivated, that they can use their initiative and they've got a good work ethic. Don't care what your age is. Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, that's good. I think sometimes, age can feel like a bit of a restrictor, but I think it's good to hear that there's still hope for both ends of the spectrum. I think it's really good. So
very much so. Very much so. Yeah. No, don't ever let age get in the way. And look, I suppose what I'm saying is true of any business, right? I mean, it's not just the animal industry. Animal industry is just particularly difficult because everybody wants to work with animals. There's such a who doesn't love animals, right?
Yeah.
So yeah. So,
I think there's look, you've been in this industry 25 years. I want to get into these questions. Actually, no, we'll get into those questions and then I'll ask you might have time to think of it. What is like a situation that is just story of stories that went from your 25 years in the industry? It's either it's unexpected, you didn't see it coming, you thought one thing, it was something else. When you think story and you're like, man, I'm gonna tell grandkids, listen here, I'm gonna tell you this, that kind of story. I'd love to hear what comes to your mind. But we'll go through these questions first. How's that sound?
Yeah. Look, it sounds good. It sounds good. But I'm going to say something to you there, right? Okay. Looking at my will recently, someone said, "What would your dying words be?" And I thought, interesting, because I've got them. They're very simple. Everybody must die. Everybody has to die, but not everybody knows how to live. And I've always known how to live. So to answer your question is difficult because every day I live. You haven't seen my car. I drive a beach buggy.
Yeah, really?
I live in Canberra and I drive a beach buggy.
Yeah, so I don't think I've actually seen any beach buggies in Canberra until I've heard this story. Yeah, now that you mentioned
I got one and I drive it. So, it is, I've lived every day. So there are lots of everything I just grab everything with both hands and everything's exciting. But I don't know, I'm sure there's a lot of funny stories that have happened to us over the years. And as you can tell, I love to talk. So, but yeah, I'm sure I can think of something. You go ahead with your questions and we'll go.
Yeah,
yes.
I did think it was going to be a tough question. I didn't think it was going to be an easy one because I did think it was going to be tough. So
to pick one thing, no.
Yeah, good luck. So first question, Pete. So this is overrated, underrated. You understand the rules, right? You're on it.
Yes.
So, number one, tarantulas as beginner pets.
I think the subject. I think it is to understand your question. I don't think it's a bad idea. I think it's. So would I be true in saying if I say underrated that I mean that it's not a problem? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. If you think it's
overrated
underrated,
would mean that it shouldn't be a problem, but it is. Does that make sense? Do I understand that question correctly?
Like so tarantulas, it's if it's underrated, you'd think it's like more people should get tarantulas as pets. Yeah, sweet.
Gotcha.
I thought
now I understand the question. Keeping tarantulas as pets, underrated. But I do think sourcing tarantulas ethically is really important. Okay, so that's a big but on there.
Okay,
so
big but as
you
well.
should get them for breeders only. All right. So
so you can capture them from the wild. Technically,
yeah, because laws don't protect insects the way they protect other native wildlife, and I've seen it. So in my lifetime, and I was part of the problem in the early days, we sold lots of large, very unusual spiders that you don't see anymore. And I never really understood the impact back then of how big owning an Australian tarantula was. And I mean, I would, it would be nothing for me to sell 5 or 6 of them a week at one stage, and they were all wild caught because it wasn't illegal. And it's a spider. Who's going to notice that until they started obliterating entire species? So now we only deal with insects that are sourced ethically.
Ethically, right. Okay.
So, sorry, loaded question, but underrated. Spiders are great pets. Scorpions are awesome. Yeah.
I've had a Flinders Ranger scorpion, had one of those for a while. I think it was fun feeding them crickets. Wood roaches, which is the crickets.
It encourages children to care.
True. And that, lots of pluses with that one. Number 2, Pete, reptile enrichment in captivity.
That's a loaded question. I don't know if you know, in our industry, this is a new one. This is very big. I think it is underrated. I think that if I do I understand that question correctly, I think it's important. So maybe not to the extent that some people have gone to, but every living thing needs enrichment because
some sort of stimulation.
You remember I said earlier on, I said you need diversity and you need without obstacles in your life and without that you can't grow. Animals are the same. So I think enrichment in animals is important. I do think some people have gone a little bit too extreme in what that enrichment should be, like building play sets. I think it could be as simple as putting a burnt piece of wood in your snake enclosure so they have to experience a new smell, that kind of thing. I wish we had more time. I've an interesting story about my hopping mice at the Reptile Zoo. Can I tell it? Do you want to hear it?
Yeah, go for it.
So I've learned something about enrichment in animals and behavior. And the one thing I learned, because our animals are captive bred, not wild, captive bred. And because we raise them in environments where we raise them slowly and we handle them, we teach them not to be afraid of certain things like people. So I've raised hopping mice next to snakes, right next door to them. There's snakes right there. And I've raised them right next to those snakes. And enrichment would be when they initially saw a snake, they're like, oh, crap. And they would build things against the wall of the enclosure to hide themselves from the snake. So fear of predators is not considered a good form of enrichment. It's actually called a form of torture, really. But it wasn't bad. But soon they got used to it. And then they got fed up and then they didn't care anymore because they realized that animal couldn't harm them. And then they started reproducing, which means they weren't afraid of the snakes anymore. So when you go to our reptile zoo, we have a black-headed python right next to a spinifex hopping mouse exhibit, and the mice couldn't care less about the snake. So enrichment then had to become something else. So we put grass in there for them to chew and build a nest. But it's interesting how enrichment can – too much of the same thing can get these animals bored or used to what they're doing. And when I had an inspection from a body, I won't name them, but let's just say someone who reviewed it and said, this is not acceptable because having it next to an animal that's a predator is causing the animal stress and torture and it can't be there. I went, do they look stressed? They're reproducing. No. So we ended up having to put a divide in there so the mice can't see the snake anymore. The reason I thought it was funny is it showed a lack of education in that particular person's field. Because what they didn't see was on the other side was a ridge-tail monitor. And so, which is actually probably more of a black-headed python's major food source than a mouse is because they're much more of a reptile eater. And then they walk past and go, oh, that looks nice. And then they keep going. And I thought that was hilarious because it showed, snakes eat mice. That's not right. Oh, there's a lizard. And it didn't compute with them. But again, the enrichment for that.
A name drop then.
Yeah, no. So, but at the end of the day, it was just funny. When you talk about enrichment, sometimes animals, seeing each other and interacting with each other is a different form of enrichment. So, and we've trained water dragons to live with water pythons, which would normally eat them. And we did train a water dragon to live with our big giant croc. His name was Lucky.
Yeah, I think, is he not in there anymore? I think I might have seen him.
No, but that's a whole other reason. No, he's alive. But Lucky grew up with the croc. So when the croc was fully grown and this water dragon was sitting in the middle of his head, the croc just accepted him. So, and that lizard went through a form of enrichment to learn to live and to avoid the croc's teeth. But no, that's because the exhibit changed. The exhibit changed and the water dragon would escape from the croc's new home.
Right.
Because he would get outside. Yeah. So anyway, sorry. Next question. My bad. Go for it.
He was enriched. That water dragon lived an enriched life through that hole, the other side of that hole. Number 3, releasing captive reptiles back into the wild.
Oh, overrated. I think it would be an awesome idea, but I think they're not addressing the initial problem enough. So there is, at the moment, there's a philosophy, and I know what it is, and I don't know if you've heard of this before. It's actually... what's the word I'm looking for? It's not evolution. It's like accelerated evolution. What they're doing is breeding enough of an animal and releasing enough of them that they keep on dying until one or two work out how not to die, and then those two can form a population of their own. It's accelerated evolution, and it's a thing. It's a real thing. So you look it up, and basically what happens is they're throwing enough mud that these animals will eventually learn how to avoid predators. It's worked really well with things like with bilbies down in South Australia. A couple of bilbies work out how to avoid predators like foxes and cats. They set up their own families, teach their family how to avoid predators. Therefore, you got to use it. So, but I think with reptiles, part of the problem is that they're breeding and releasing without addressing the initial problem enough. So I think it's great that we are breeding endangered and extinct species in captivity. I do wholeheartedly believe in that. But I think, just breeding them to re-release is probably a bit overrated.
Okay, cool. That was number 3. Number 4, excuse me, public perception of reptiles in media.
It depends what media you follow. Your algorithms can play a very big role in that one. My algorithms show nothing but reptile lovers. But when you get into mainstream media, certainly when you see posts on certain pages, I think it is is it overrated? Yeah. I'll say one thing. Someone here in the ACT on mainstream media, a local Canberra page, posted a photo of a dead snake. They killed it. Hey, folks, just warning you, these things are out there. We killed this one in our driveway. Watch out. They got slammed. Not only did they get slammed, they got slammed so badly that they not only took the post down, they actually completely removed their profile.
Yeah, really?
So I guess the general populace itself is becoming far more aware
against the idea of
harming wildlife. But when we post, there's still the odd person who will troll us. Why pay $150 or $200 for a snake catcher when a $7 shovel from Bunnings will do it? We just say thanks for trolling, see you next week. So there is a little bit of a it is a bit overrated when it comes to some freelance mainstream, what would you call influencers? There's been some people come to Australia from overseas recently, and they're running around the bush catching and picking up venomous snakes.
I have seen.
Catching snakes and crocs in the wild. There's a lot of people on mainstream media handling venomous snakes and saying, oh, this is all right. That's a freak show. I don't agree with or believe in a freak show.
Can I ask as well, because, law-wise, legislation-wise, card catchers kind of stuff, is there that you're aware of governmentally, when people from overseas come in catching wildlife without permits and whatnot, is there a tracking down of that and some sort of repercussions?
No, as far as I can see, there's not. And in fact, I mean, if you were Australian and you were well known, you quite possibly could get hammered pretty badly. I know that when very famous people go and do that kind of work, they do so with a research permit or with someone with them that would allow it. But I saw someone showed me a social media post not that long ago about a guy running around in Australia catching all these venomous animals and handling them. And as far as I know, he's still doing it now overseas. And another person famously catching venomous snakes and dropping them down rabbit holes to chase rabbits out of holes. I mean, that kind of stuff I don't agree with at all. It devalues these animals. We shouldn't be teaching people that they're going to kill you. I mean, they're not evil creatures, but at the same time, we shouldn't be devaluing them either. So when someone takes a whole bunch of venomous snakes and puts them in their hands and handles them and goes, look, these things won't kill you, they're amazing, and puts them on children's heads and does stuff and other things like that, that's a freak show. And that's not what this industry should be about. This should be about teaching not a fear of the animals, but a respect of them. There's got to be a balance.
Yes.
So certainly with social media, I think it's both extremes. And I don't understand how a lot of these people come here, do what they do and not get away with it. Because if I went and picked up an echidna right, here in Canberra, and put that all over my Facebook page, I tell you what, I get a visit the next day. So I would.
Yeah, you would. I feel that.
So,
what you're saying, I'm understanding what you're saying.
yeah. So
it's interesting.
But anyway,
good to hear your thoughts on that. Next question, number 5 is the final one. Volunteering in wildlife parks.
Yeah, it's totally underrated. It's very underrated. There should be more of it. I don't think people realise. It is difficult to get in, though. I mean, insurance, and I will say this in defence of wildlife parks, okay? Insurances are extremely expensive. And when you start bringing a lot of volunteers in, it can get really difficult.
Okay.
I don't have a lot of experience with zoos, but the one I do know charges money for volunteers to be there. But that covers their insurances and also changes the dynamic. Because you may not realise this, but having volunteers opens you up as a business, not just as a wildlife park. It opens you up to all the things that every business can be in trouble for. If a volunteer is with you too long, they can claim that you've employed them. So when you asked me earlier about what's it like running a business, when you start employing staff and start looking at that side of the business, it gets very complex.
Very technical.
Mate, give me a venomous snake any day. Work out the legalities of a volunteer that hurts themselves? Nah. You know. So certainly there is that 100%. And so I think there should be more of it. It would be nice to see government facilities helping private and other facilities and bring more people in. It is difficult because numbers are limited, and when you're dealing with animals, you do have to be safe, both for the welfare of the animal and the person involved. So there's a lot involved. We've recently changed the way we run our volunteers. We now have orientation days. We don't just bring them in and train them individually. We now bring them in as a full orientation day to work out their capabilities, and they have set times that they and they can only volunteer for set periods of time before we have to say, I'm sorry, you can't come in anymore, otherwise it's too long. So there is that side of it as well.
Okay.
There's very important.
That is very important, and I didn't actually realize you could potentially claim that you've been employed if you as a volunteer staying long enough. Interesting. I guess to kind of again with this as we close the conversation, kind of the final last point, Pete, with this story, what is it that comes to mind?
Actually leads into exactly what you just said then. Probably one of the funnier moments in my life, I would say. I just come straight to head. So what scares me more than I don't know, back then the crocodile was only 2.5 meters long. What scares me more than an estuarine crocodile tearing me to shreds is an estuarine crocodile biting a staff member, because workers' compensation and that scares me more than a saltwater crocodile does, okay? As a business owner, I'll stay awake at night worrying about that. I wouldn't think twice about picking up an inland taipan. Wouldn't give it a second thought. So when we were handling Charlie in the early days, all my staff were totally and utterly forbade from entering the enclosure, feeding him or handling him, because I was just so worried. Someone's going to get hurt. It's going to be me, but I can live with that. That's fine. So, but that was easy because at that point in time, he was only 80 centimetres, then a metre, and then 1.2 metres, and then 2 metres. So twice a year we have to do a health check. So I go in the enclosure, we drain. So his smaller enclosure, not the new one, that's changed everything. In his smaller enclosure, we drained all the water out because crocs are far less mobile on land. And our enclosure didn't have enough room to drag him onto the land. So we'd go in, we'd lasso him, I'd jump on him, hold him down, and then I'd sit on him, hold him down, then I would restrain his mouth and then bring the other staff and volunteers in to help me pick him up. He's safe now. In fact, there's photos of members of the public and staff handling this croc with the band on his mouth. So anyway, when he grew a bit bigger, one day I went in there and I said, okay, I'm doing this myself, guys. I'm doing this myself. And I lassoed him, and they're all going, you sure you don't need help? No, I've got this. And I dived in and I grabbed him and I'm holding him. And he stood up and walked. And I'm holding him, and he's just walking across the floor, and I'm going, oh, crap, crap, get in here. So, so I had his mouth by then. And because what I was worried about is, as you might know, they then do a death roll because their objective is you've got their mouth and there's not a lot of muscle structure in their mouth for biting, but what they can do is shake you off. As soon as you lose a grip on that mouth, they come at you all guns blazing. Oh, yeah. So I dived in and I had his jaw and I got him, and he just picked me up and started walking off with me. So the staff at that time, luckily for me, were poised because you've got to be for safety reasons. They all leapt in and dived on his back. So from that day forth, we do a little bit like you see on the documentaries. We lasso him and 5 of us jump on him. And but I always remember the day the croc picked me up and walked off with me. So I always thought that was a funny situation. Yeah.
That's a great one. Walking, you did. When I'm older, I want to, I'm thinking like if I'm 4 years old and I'm telling my parents like, when I'm older, I want to be able to ride a pony. And instead, 4 years old, Pete's like, "No, I want to ride a crocodile when I'm post 20." That's great. I love that. Yeah. Well, Pete, if for people that want to reach out to you, what are some platforms? All the details we're going to be putting in the show notes, but just name some of the platforms that people can find you on. Yeah,
look, certainly we are very active on our Facebook and Instagram pages these days. We haven't ventured into the world of TikTok and even YouTube yet, but we really want to, because what we're discovering, I've told you how diverse our business is. We've suddenly discovered when we started sharing that with people, we caught a snake. Oh, we built an enclosure. Oh, we just had to catch our croc. Oh, we just built a new croc enclosure. Oh, we just caught another snake. People are suddenly going, oh my God, this is so amazing. And our following has skyrocketed because I never really thought about it. I never thought how interesting that was, how interesting it was food prep was for 400 lizards, and that we were at a festival on the weekend, and what it takes to be at a festival and what it takes to pack up and set up a display, because we do these big giant mobile displays stuff. Yeah. So certainly Facebook and Instagram, we definitely have moved very quickly with those ones. So you can always find us through that. Awesome. Obviously our website's a bit outdated, but it's there. And we're always happy for people to contact us through our website if they need to as well. Yeah.
Amazing. Well, thank you, Pete, for all the wisdom that you've shared and the great stories as well. I've loved it. Walking with a riding a crocodile. What a time! It's been a wild adventure you've had. Again, so if people want to reach out to you, check you out on any social media platform, pretty much coming up. You're going to be on them all. And then if you're in Canberra, check out the Canberra Reptile Zoo. That's the place to be.
Please do. Yeah, even if I'm not on site, my staff love to share their stories and their experiences. And I have a lovely group of people working with me who just are really, every one of us are there because we want to be there. I don't think it's a job for any of us, to be honest. So if you can come and share that with us, that money, it helps us grow even more. So come along, share your thoughts and feelings with us, talk to us, be there. It's awesome. And I've loved sharing this with you today. I as you can tell, I have lots of long story. We've been talking for a very long time now, so I don't envy you editing this. But it's a side of the business I enjoy. I always talk about my animals all the time, but I think the story of how my zoo has come around has been even more interesting, and you've only just scraped the surface tonight. Just literally scraped the surface.
Honestly, I believe that. I reckon if we get this out, there's many more hours I could come from this episode.
Some of them will be more interesting about enclosure designs and how we achieved our croc enclosure and other stuff like that. But based on what you're talking about, this industry, I'm hoping that anything I have to say here will help people. Yeah.
Amazing. Well, thank you, Pete, for coming on the show.
That's okay.
It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you for watching or listening to today's episode. I hope you enjoyed it. If you'd like to find more information on today's guest or more information on the podcast, you can find those details in the description below. Otherwise, I hope and look forward to seeing you in the next one.